I'm wondering whether the senator is familiar with the fact that the language which precluded the application of Section 1031 to American citizens was in the bill that we originally approved in the Armed Services Committee, and the administration asked us to remove the language which says that U.S. citizens and lawful residents would not be subject to this section. Is the senator familiar with the fact that it was the administration that asked us to remove the very language which we had in the bill which passed the committee, and that we removed it at the request of the administration, that would have said that this determination would not apply to U.S. citizens and lawful residents? I'm just wondering, is the senator familiar with the fact that it was the administration which asked us to remove the very language, the absence of which is now objected to by the senator from Illinois?
I'm familiar now.
Drones coming soon to a protest near you. In addition to Obama's expansive drone killing apparatus in the Middle East, Congress passed a bill earlier this year that opens the U.S. skies to unmanned drone surveillance for domestic and military police operations. In a surveillance society where people are already accustomed to being filmed on every street corner, the constant aerial surveillance of drones will make privacy even more obsolete. There are currently 300 active drone permits in the U.S. held by varied institutions. According to FOIA requests, that includes dozens of universities and small law enforcement agencies. Remember this story from North Dakota?
Nelson County, North Dakota Sheriff Kelly Yonke went looking for 6 missing cattle on a Brossard family farm when 3 armed Brossard brothers chased him away. Yonke called the Highway Patrol, a SWAT team, a bomb squad, and a Predator drone operated by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The drone was used to surveil the property until the Brossard brothers were observed to be unarmed. Then the SWAT team moved in to make the arrests.
The drone industry is a huge one. 50 companies are developing over 150 different systems, ranging from miniature models to those comparable to airliners. Many of them will also be armed, taking the weapons that the U.S. uses for war right here at home. Although the government claims that the drones will only be used for specific cases and not just wanton surveillance, we see time and time again constant abuses of power within the expanding security and surveillance industries. So are these drones essential to our national security, or are they the latest infringement of our civil liberties? Amy Stepanovich is the National Security Counsel for EPIC. She works on the issues of national security, government surveillance, digital security, and open government, and is here to tell me why we should keep our eyes on the skies. Amy, Congress hasn't really had a hearing talking about the implications of what unmanned drone surveillance would do in the U.S. Why do you think this is, and what do you think the implications would be?
Well, Congress passed this bill, as you said earlier this year, that allowed drones to, or will facilitate drones operating in the United States. And they did it without a hearing, without really anything. They passed it very quickly, and it went through, and nobody really heard anything about it. 2 senators just recently have come back, Senator Markey and Senator Barton, and said, wait a second, there are privacy issues with this. We need to have the FAA and we need to have the manufacturers answer a few questions about what's going on. But this kind of butts up against deadlines that have already been passed into law that the FAA has to meet in order to increase drones in the airspace. So there's some tension there between if we're going to address the privacy issues, which are very, very real and serious, or if we're going to move forward with these firm deadlines in place, and if the skies are going to open up without privacy protections, which would be very bad.
Yeah, that would be awful. And I'm glad, the ACLU is really on the forefront of this, trying to push for these provisions and really some congressional oversight on what this would mean for the privacy of Americans. And when I think of war technology being used right here at home, it is a really scary concept. I mean, when you think of a tank being used in Afghanistan, you don't really think of it being in a park nearby. And what would that do to the psyche of the American people, bringing this war technology that we're using right here at home?
Well, a lot of people believe, a lot of researchers and security experts, including Ryan Kalo, who's on EPIC's advisory board, believe that using drones in the United States will actually instigate a privacy renaissance, that people are going to look up and see these, flying machines flying around, catching them on camera, being able to videotape their every move, and they're actually going to have a visceral reaction in a way that they haven't had before to persistent tracking, most of which has been done online. And you can't watch an online tracker watch you from website to website, but you can see a drone and you can see it in the air keeping track of you. For the most part, there are the ones that you can't see that fly too high.
And do you think that this would be detrimental to the growing discontent and dissent that you see in America? I mean, I know you're talking about that this would cause kind of a retaliatory thing. And do you think that that's the case? Do you think that these people are not going to accept this and that it's really going to, or do you think that it's going to stifle dissent and really create the chilling effect where people are going to say, I don't want to do anything because I'm scared that I'm being watched?
I think that is definitely part of the concern. We see in studies again and again reveal that when people are on camera and people know that they are being watched, they are less likely to speak out, they're less likely to protest. Actually, in Washington, D.C., it came out that cameras were being put into place in order to watch areas where protests were about to occur, in order to stifle dissent, which is a big problem. And I think that that might be something that happens, but I think that even more than it stifling dissent is people are going to come back and say no. I think people really think that this might have crossed a line. And unless privacy protections are put into place before drones enter the airspace, I don't think people are going to let it happen. I think people are going to come back.
Do you think that they'll even know, though? It seems like a lot of people are so out of touch and detached from the surveillance state. It's so, we're so conditioned to just accept these small, incremental surveillance provisions in our lives. Do you think that people will really even know that they're being surveilled by drones?
Well, the studies show that after these regulations are put into place, after these deadlines come and the FAA allows drones in our airspace, that actually tens of thousands of drones are going to enter our airspace in the next 10 years. And I don't think Americans can ignore that. That's not an incremental change. That's a huge change. And you're seeing them, like you said earlier in the stemming, at universities, law enforcement, all over the place being used for things that you just don't really think about drone aircraft being used for. And they might have very positive implications. They might be used to identify where forest fires are, or one drone actually in the United States was used to see that a plant was actually polluting the water. However, they also have very serious privacy and civil liberties repercussions.
What about the people who say, well, I have nothing to hide, I don't care, I could be surveilled and I'm not doing anything wrong? Why should the average American care?
Well, I think that whenever you come up against surveillance, you find that any widespread method of surveillance is going to catch certain instances of bad actors doing bad deeds and miss instances of people who aren't doing anything wrong. However, when catching those bad actors comes at the cost of widespread, near constant surveillance of the American public, it's not in line with our constitutional values. It's not in line with what we as an American country stands for.
And what about, hearing you talk about this makes me think of the Patriot Act. And it's like these provisions were set into place over 10 years ago, and so many people are just accept them now. It's like maybe at first we'll be up in arms about it and say, we don't want this. Is this really necessary to have this wanton surveillance of everyone just to catch a few bad apples or whatnot? But I mean, how likely are we to really repeal this or do anything about it if these provisions aren't put in place, the privacy provisions?
Well, I think there might be a little bit of a difference, or I'm hoping there's a little bit of a difference. First of all, we're catching this very early on. The Patriot Act was passed very quickly. It went into place very quickly, and nobody really had a chance to say, wait a second, we need to stop and think about it. We're catching this right after the act has been passed. People have been talking about drone surveillance for quite some time now, and I think people are on the issue quicker. The other issue is that this isn't military. This isn't for terrorism. The Patriot Act kind of came into play under this very real threat that people thought that we were going to be, once again, the target of a large-scale terrorist attack. Drones operating in the United States under regular law enforcement, police, surveillance, and conducting just normal watching of everyday American citizens they're not out to catch terrorists. They're out to catch just normal everyday people, maybe doing something bad, but the threat is very, very different. I think people are going to know that.
Yeah, after 9/11, it seemed like there was this growing culture of fear, and everyone was just like, just do whatever it takes to, catch terrorists and whatnot. And this just seems like it's very random.
Yes.
People know that there's drone wars going on. They're kind of detached from it, but bringing it right here at home seems like a big step for the political establishment to really play with. It is really egregious, and I was wondering if you could touch upon what kind of operations are we looking at? What kind of drones? There's so many different drones that they're talking about. There's so many different companies that are pushing the drones. Could you elaborate on any specifics of what type of drones are really we're going to be seeing?
Well, you can see, drones come in every single shape and size. In the United States, the Customs and Border Protection Bureau actually operates 9 Predator drones, which are the drones that we're accustomed to seeing in the battlefields and wartime. And they primarily use those to watch the borders. However, you're also seeing those in North Dakota being used to catch cow thieves, which is a little bit out of the realm of what Customs and Border Protection is supposed to do. There are also drones that look more like helicopters or smaller and can be used for more nuanced security or surveillance, being able to watch people as they go about their lives just on a more minute level. And those are the ones that are being used by law enforcement and by private companies. You're seeing those being used by real estate agents to conduct or kind of surveil property and keep an eye on what property they're selling. They can give tours to people who maybe can't see the house in person. They're also being used by paparazzi. I think there's a huge fear that in California specifically that these drones are going to be used to increase paparazzi surveillance of actors. And finally, they're being used across the United States to just increase surveillance of people and watch as people are going about just activities.
It is truly frightening once the establishment opens it up to private industry and anyone can really take initiative to use these drones to do whatever they please, deems necessary. That was Amy Stepanovich, National Security Counsel for EPIC.